Welcome back, everyone, to 101 Questions That Church Planters Ask. I'm one of your hosts, Danny Parmelee.
And I'm Chris Highfill.
And today we're going to be answering the question, what do I do when someone wants to leave my church? So I'm really excited about this episode, and partly because this is one of them that I learned the hard way and made mistakes for. Actually, I'd probably even say the first 5 years. On my approach to kind of answering this question for myself was do everything that you can to try to keep someone at your church. And so the short answer, at least for me during that time, was just use guilt. And you'd be surprised, guilt works really, really well to keep people at your church for a short period of time. And then after that, it kind of runs out. So a little bit of just even, background. When we planted, we talked about this in one of our previous episodes with kind of like the covenant thing and having people kind of commit to being part of the church plant. And in my eyes, even though I was warned that people would leave the church, even on the launch team, I wasn't ready for it. And so when people started to come to me to either make that decision, whether they called me, emailed me, texted me, or just all of a sudden stopped showing up at things, I took it really, really hard, really, really personally. And so I actually wrote down some things to kind of prep for this podcast a little bit. And my number one thing is you got to kind of coach yourself first. And Chris, you can jump in on this a little bit. It's really hard to not take it personally when someone leaves the church. And so, Chris, I don't know if you have just... Yeah. Even in your early days of, or even memories of when specific people or couples or families decided to leave the church and how you took it personally, whether it was personal or not.
Yeah, I mean, people will always say that, right? They'll leave and they'll give you maybe one or two reasons why they're leaving. They're not going to give you the whole reason, right? There may be 100 reasons why they're leaving. But the big thing, and something I learned early on in planting is... I would go to like seminars and hear that you're going to lose, all of your launch team within 18 to 24 months of planting the church. And I thought, dude, you don't know me. I'm really good with people. I'm a people person. I'm a people pleaser. And just like you, I kind of had the church background in my previous role as a student pastor at church. Do whatever you can to please these people and keep them. And it really... It wasn't until we planted that I learned the term out counseling people out of the church. And I'm sure we're going to cover that here in a bit. But like for me, it was so difficult when people would leave the church. And I took it so extremely personal. And today I actually celebrate when people leave. And it still may sting a bit, right? But I've learned over the years, if you let them leave well with dignity and you let them know that when I see you at the grocery store, we're going to say hi, and that you wish them the best. And I always tell them, whether it's in an email, text message, or in person, or even over the phone, you're always welcome at our church. I always say,
"Hey, don't steal all my stuff. We're only on number one here." So
sorry.
All right, but no, you're perfect. So number two, what you started to say is to understand that the stated reason is not always the reason. So there's, like Chris said, there's a number of reasons why people leave. A lot of times the main reasons are they're just not connecting with other people. It's usually a relational, a friendship thing, something like that. However, whether it's conscious or subconscious, people won't say that. Instead, they're going to say it's about the theology, it's about the mission or the vision, all of these different things. And a lot of times it's not that. Now, the reason why that's so important to understand is when people would come to me and they'd say, hey, the reason I'm leaving is I'm not being fed here. And so then I would counteract and be like, oh, okay, well, let's get you in a, discipleship group. And, just so you understand, the preaching on Sundays meant for I'd go on this whole thing. It was a total waste of time, a total waste of air, because that wasn't the real reason. So, and you may not know the real reason always, but just understand what they're saying to you more than likely isn't the real or full reason. People just don't want to say, I don't like the church building, or the service times are too far of the drive, or I don't like your wife, or whatever. It actually is for that. So I don't know if you
And when
want
you
to
do find out the
something.
real reason, when you do find out the real reason, it's really important because sometimes someone else from the church will come and tell you the real reason, right? And that's when it's really important to keep your composure and not be angry.
Yeah.
Okay, like
Yeah.
just celebrate it. Well, man, I wish them the best, and I'm praying they find a good church. And I hope they know they're always welcome here. Like that's like when people come to me and they tell me the real. Oh, well, let me tell you the real reason why, right? And that's where, for me, that's where it always got more personal because I'm like, well, why wouldn't they tell me the reason? You know? But like it doesn't play well. Here's what doesn't play well: you being angry with other people about it, like or talking down about them or bad about them. You're a leader, and leaders lead, and I think it's really important to. I'm not asking you to toe the company line, but I think it's really important that you're positive and affirming about whatever their next step is.
And so what I say is that when people say that, and again, they're bracing for, and most people are bracing for that when they do tell you that they are going to get yelled at. So they have they might even come with a little list of their stuff and excuses and all of that. And so if your response can be composed and your number one thing, the first thing that can come out of your mouth is the word thanks. So you had mentioned that, Chris, and that's just a huge one, again, that I didn't learn until later on. And to say, you know what, thank you so much for the time that you've invested here, you know, the money that you've invested, the people that you've impacted. And so if you're able to do that, it often even diffuses the situation. And for you to just, you know, acknowledge that, even if they've been a real pain in the butt, which here's the funny thing, Chris, you and I both have stories of people that were pains in the butt. We couldn't wait to get rid of them. And as soon as they said, I'm leaving the church, we still took it personal and tried to convince them to stay. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, I don't know, there's just some weird ego issue that we have as pastors and church planters. But if you can just say thanks. And then the second thing, which you alluded to, Chris, is that you do send them well. So in other words, to say like, hey, totally understand, you know, thank you so much. You know, have you found a place yet? Here's some different places that we think that you ought to consider. Now, they have Google. They know probably the other churches in town. They've probably actually already been to them 10 to 15 times before they ever had a conversation with you about it. You know, but by you saying that, it sends them well. In other words, so the illustration I use is that in the beginning I was tight-fisted with people. I wanted to do everything I could to keep people so that we would keep that number, keep that momentum, keep that giving, keep that volunteering. But if you can be open-handed with people and they sense that, in other words, hey, you want what's best for me, not just what's best for this local congregation, it tends to fare well for them, that they feel cared and you know, cared for and loved. And then the other thing that you said, which I think is, you know, this is kind of where, however the conversation goes, once you get towards the end, is to say, hey, I want you to know you can come back here and visit anytime you want. And if God ever led you back here, we just want you to know, you know, that you're welcome here. Instead of, if you leave right now, I want you to know that you're stepping away and never ever could you come back here. You know, never walk back in this.
You betrayed me.
Yeah, in this way. And so here's what I found out, you know, which is pretty obvious. In the beginning, the more tight-fisted I was, the more that I used guilt, the more that I tried to use the analogy that, you know, church membership is like a marriage, and so it's kind of like divorce, and Jesus hates divorce, or Jesus hates that you're leaving this church. How dare you go to the church down the street, type of thing. That really helped push people out and to keep them out. And I'm sure that as they shared their experience with other people, it was negative. The reverse happens. The more open-handed that you are, that you talk to someone, sometimes even when you hear from other people they're leaving and you say, hey, can we have a conversation? They will sometimes reluctantly have that conversation with you. The more open-handed that you are, then they talk positively. We had a number of people who, how did you hear about the church? And they heard it from someone who had left the church. And because they had a positive experience, even though they left the church, oh, yeah, you got to go there, and Pastor Danny's really great, or Pastor Chris is really great, you know, that type of thing. And we even had where multiple people over the years would eventually come back. So they left. We didn't have a children's ministry, or it wasn't meeting their needs, or there was some relational issue. And then eventually they ended up coming back, to the church. And again, that's not your like ultimate goal. You really do need to be open-handed, be okay if they plug in somewhere else. And if you can have that mentality that you send someone well, it will just go so well for you instead of being tight-fisted. So any concluding
And I think that's a
thoughts,
culture.
Chris?
I think that's a culture you have to build in whatever your assimilation process is. If you have like a starting point thing, or like a new members thing, or whatever it is that you do every 6 to 8 weeks to welcome new people into your church, we always just say we're going to be open-handed from the beginning. We want something for you, not something from you. All right. And so we know the power of being a part of a life-giving church, one that you're connected in relationally, and one where you have some kind of a responsibility where you're serving. And so if that's not this church, let me help you find the church where that could be. And one other way to thank people that leave, especially those that are on your launch team, as you think about church planting and all those things, is to thank them for helping you build the church. Like I always say, to launch team members or to people that have been around for a really long time that leave, I always say, thank you for helping. And for the rest of your life, you're going to be able to say, I helped build a church. And I'm really grateful for that. You made my dream your dream. And so thank you. And dude, for me, it's a heartfelt thing. And it's amazing. I mean, I just this last weekend, Josh and Samantha came back to our church and even came to our assimilation thing that we do called Closer Look. They've been visiting for 6 weeks, but I did their wedding 8 years ago, and they're back.
Yeah.
And the reason why they're back is that it wasn't a cult. We didn't act like cults say we're never going to talk again, just so you know. And they shame people, shun people. We're Christians, okay? And so as a result of that, we should apply grace. And man, I think that only good things will come if you loosen the grip on people and realize these people belong to Jesus. They don't belong to you.
Boom. So. Mic drop on that. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching this episode of 101 Questions That Church Planners Ask. And if you have a question, just head on over to our website, churchplannersask.com. You can leave us a comment there, and we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep asking those questions.